This is a very difficult to come by game. It was a crowdfunded campaign that was moderately successful, but not a lot of copies got out there. And after the fact, it really gained a ton of attention and notoriety in the board gaming community. Now, Camp Grizzly typically has a price tag of $350, $450, $550. I saw one copy that just recently sold on eBay with the expansions for well over $700. So it is not an insignificant price tag that comes with this game. So it really is one that you probably want to know a little bit of information about going into. Now, Camp Grizzly is a cooperative game. And if you know me, you know I hate cooperative games. Well, I hate not good cooperative games, and I find most of them are not good, in my opinion. But there are a few cooperative games I actually enjoy. I will play Pandemic any day. I mean, it's a solid game, and I feel like a lot of the games that came afterwards that tried to build upon it actually didn't make a better game. Some did, of course. This is a beautiful and very thematic experience that has you and your friends playing camp counselors, and you will traverse the board, split up to go different ways to accomplish different objectives. You'll find campers along the way that'll tag along for the adventure. You will go grab different items because the game has several different ways it can end, which are the finales, and each finale has a different prerequisite. So depending on what items you have access to and your proximity to that finale, it'll determine which way the game's going to end for your group. You'll strategize the best paths for each camper to take to get these items you need. You will sacrifice some of the campers to buy yourself an extra turn or two. You will quickly change your plans because the game constantly throws story changes at you. Now, before we get too deep into the critiques of Camp Grizzly, I do want to say one of the biggest advantages of this game is that it is so newer to the hobby friendly, intro friendly. It does give you an opportunity to pull in friends based on the theme, the accessibility, and the familiarity with your potential victims to drag them into our cult. Do you have time to talk about our Board and Savior? Hey, you see what I did there? That's my friend's channel. Go check out Board and Savior.
Oh. Hello there, chaps, chapettes, and chapexes.
So throughout the game, you're going to have this serial killer in a bear's mask who is moving around and trying to catch up to you to obviously do what serial killers do. So as you're traversing the board with your minis, Otis, your psychopath in a bear mask, is going to be chasing down the various camp counselors, which is you and your friends at the table. And Otis, the psychopath, is going to get increasingly more dangerous and harder to deal with. So you've got these little rings that basically represent what his current speed is, what dice he's currently rolling for damage, representing the potential more deadly attack, and then the actual damage he's dealing each time he does successfully hit, which I guess that would actually be the more deadly attack. The middle one would be the more successful the attack is. Your camp counselors will each have their own card. And what's interesting is your movement speed and your health are tied together. So as you start with usually 3, every time you take a damage, you'll notice your speed decreases a little bit in most cases. But then when you get to that last one, before Otis would take you out, your speed actually increases, typically by a significant amount. And that is a representation of your fight or flight, your adrenaline kicking in. And I thought that was extremely thematic. And one thing about this game is the mechanics may be simple, but they are so intuitive to what the game is about and what it's doing. I mean, they really work well. There is obviously a luck factor here because you have dice. And at first I was really drawn up about that. But what I realized is that means throughout the game, no matter what items you're getting, no matter what weapons, what defensive actions, etc., you never know for sure if you can handle Otis, because you never know what the result of that die can be. And as Otis progresses through the game, which he inevitably will, that dice gets bigger and bigger. And what's funny about that is the bigger the dice gets, the more unwielding it is, the more sporadic and random it feels. It really does simulate the actions of a killer psychopath who at first is more precise, but not as dangerous. But as they get crazed and bloodthirsty, they're swinging violently. And if they hit, it's hitting for much more. However, it's easier to dodge sometimes. So very fascinating how they tie the random mechanics into this game. These little tiles here with the question marks, these are going to be the objective tokens you're traversing the board to try to find. Sometimes they'll actually be bad. This progresses Otis, potentially making Otis more dangerous. But sometimes they're an item you need, or a health, what is this? A first aid station to gain some health back. Some keys. Several of the finales need keys, a crankshaft, a car battery. You get the idea. You're going grabbing these items and trying very hard not to let Otis get a hold of you. It's very fun, very thematic, and the cards are really beautiful, the illustrations. It's got kind of an old school comic book vibe to it. If you ever saw the Walking Dead comic books, it's very much in that realm. It's an 18 up game for sure. The theme alone, but also the cards can get a little gory. The finales, my only real big critique on the finales, well, no, I have a couple critiques if I'm being honest, but your finale cards, you only get so many of them in the base game. I'm guessing the various expansions give you a lot more. And there's 2 of each type of finale. So basically there's 4 potential finales that can occur. And based on how you shuffle it, it's going to be 1 of 2 for each of the 4. But after you played this game a few times, you probably are going to know most of the finales, if not all of the finales, pretty well. And that does take a little bit of the excitement out. Not a ton, because the thing is, you still are trying to prepare for it. And the more you get to know the finales, the more you realize it's important to not just go to them immediately and prep a little bit more at first. So I'm not totally disappointed. There are pros and cons to knowing the finales. I think I enjoyed it more when they were random and it's like, oh my God, is this going to work? But I don't hate it on the back end where I know most of the finales, because I'll say, let's really make sure we've got this. Let's make sure we've got a couple weapons. Let's make sure we don't leave anyone back at camp, because some of these, all of those counselors will immediately die. You know, it's fine. I can live with that, but really would have liked a little bit more variety in these cards for the base game. The other critique I have on the finales is that they're a bit anticlimactic. And what I mean by that is this game imposes pressure on you and your teammates in a way that very few other games do. I promise you're probably going to be laughing and gasping the whole time you're playing it, and you will feel that pressure. Oh my God, how am I going to stay ahead of Otis? I need this to happen. I just don't need this to happen. And of course, the thing that doesn't need to happen always happens. And you got to figure out, how do I survive it when that one thing that wasn't supposed to happen just happened? And then you finally get to the end. It finally all worked out. Some of your friends are probably dead. And then what happens? An ending that takes less than 5 minutes, potentially less than 1 minute, occurs. And it kind of feels like, is that it? We're done? It was so tense. Like, what do you mean we're done? And, you know, it can just be that you get to the finale and the finale has you facing off with Otis and you roll really good and then Otis is dead and then the game is over. It's a fairly short game, usually in under an hour. So maybe you just run it again. That's usually how I've been doing it. But I know me and some of the people I've played with have definitely found the ending less exciting as the game itself. And I do think that could have been avoided. I don't know if any of the expansions improve upon that. I only have the base game. That was expensive enough already. And I like to review games based on the base game and tell people expansions exist, but I typically don't let those influence my review of the base. I really, really like the asymmetry of the characters. Some characters are kind of more important to have in the game than others. You know, there's usually a character or two that when we sit down and say, oh, someone really needs to get Tracy or someone really needs to get Jody, and you can live without them, but, you know, maybe a variety of more characters could have improved that. So you can kind of build different strategies, but like Tracy's where she can actually redirect Otis. I mean, there are so many situations that is very important, and I'm not sure if anyone else really has an alternative that would make that kind of irrelevant. And I think a lot of my critique here of this game is a little bit more would have made it better. And I know I just said I don't want to use expansions to influence my critiques, but most of these critiques could actually be solved with the expansions. But understand the expansions are incredibly expensive and even harder to find than the base game. And I always will say, if a game is not fun in its base form, then I'm not going to waste my time and get the expansions, because I'm always going to introduce a person to a base game typically, and if they don't have a good experience, then how are we ever going to get to the expansions? So I'm not saying this is a bad experience. This is actually a really fun experience, and now that I mentioned that word experience, I want to spend some time on it, because this may be, let me put it this way. Every board game exists somewhere on a scale from experience to game. You know, actually playing a game and experiencing a game. Another channel recently did a video talking about Candyland. I wish I could remember what channel it was. It was brilliant. They explained Candyland as a game that you experience. It just happens to you, and that's very true. This game is somewhere in that scale, closer to experience than most modern board games. There's still plenty to be played here, and you will feel like you have some agency, but you will also feel like most of the time you're just reacting to things happening to you. Again, that's kind of how Nemesis is too. So if you played Nemesis and you like that, then you know what you're getting into. But this may be a little bit more than Nemesis. And why that's important is because this may be a game that is great to experience, but the replayability may fall a little bit more flat. And if you have a game this expensive in your collection, you probably want to enjoy most, if not all, of the plays. I think where I'm going to most enjoy this is taking it to conventions and giving other people an opportunity to experience this game that otherwise wouldn't have it. You know, maybe they have been thinking about buying it, and I can show them the game and help them make that choice. I would say if you play with more family, more people who are not hardcore gamers, and maybe you do go to a lot of conventions and you like to be the person with the special game that everyone wants to come play with you, this is a great game. It really is. But if you want a game that is strategically deep, that has a ton of replayability, that has modern mechanics, this definitely falls a bit short. In my opinion, it's not worth the current price tag. It's certainly worth every penny of what a reprint price tag would be, which would be well under $100, I'm sure. If it ever goes back to crowdfunding, definitely don't miss out on this. But at $300, $400 plus, I can't recommend this game to too many people. And I don't even know if I can recommend myself keeping it. The only reason I'm going to keep it momentarily is, as I spoke about earlier, I do want to take it to some conventions and give other people a chance to try it. And I want to get more people's feedback of the game in general. It's very fun. I mean, I like it. It's fun in the way watching a slasher movie is fun. And that's kind of what they were going for, right? I think they accomplished exactly what they wanted to accomplish, which is sitting down with your friends and kind of experiencing a horror slasher together. It's super cool. I'll obviously be keeping it over Halloween because I definitely want to do a couple Halloween parties where we can pull out a game like this. So my recommendation for Camp Grizzly is Definitely play it if you get the opportunity. If you are a die-hard Friday the 13th slasher film buff, then yeah, I could see this being the big grail in your collection. If you love being the person who, like I said, brings the game to conventions to give other people a chance and to have the cool game, you know, I get it, no judgment. We all like to feel special sometimes. And in a hobby where every game is so special and so loved, it does kind of feel cool to have the game no one else really has when you go to a convention. So, you know, that's cool. Also, that's very addictive, I should warn you. In a world where every new game that comes out is a deck builder or an engine builder, it is a breath of fresh air, in my opinion. And just having a game that is so easy to teach is nice. But yeah, my official stance on this one is under $150 all day. Under $100 for sure. Under $50, do not turn it down. 300, 400 plus, only if you feel like you need it. I think the next convention I'll be at is Tantrum Con in January, late January of next year, North Carolina, Charlotte. And I will definitely bring Camp Grizzly with me. So if you are going to Tantrum Con, join the Discord, let me know, and we'll try to link up. And if we can squeeze in a game, I'd love to show it to you. I'll be bringing other girls with me too to give people an opportunity to experience. Tempted to even bring mushroom eaters with me, which, if you haven't heard of it, it's a trip. Aha. But all jokes aside, I appreciate you watching. This was a super fun one. I really can't wait to table it more. I don't think it's gonna make it the long run in my collection, but I foresee it hanging around for at least a year to see how much I enjoy it over time. And I'd like to know in the comments, what do you think? Do you think that a game with a price tag this high really needs to blow you away with mechanics? Is a game like this justified in the collection? Am I totally off base saying I can't recommend it, knowing full well I've enjoyed every time I've played the game? I'd love to know your stance on this one, but until next time, keep hunting that cardboard.